So yeah, hey there. What about? This took a bit longer than I wanted to. I just wanted to show something interesting here. Yeah, I am toying with Mapmaking in free software, except that I am using FoundryVTT for the actual VTT. But I am in a pretty cool point because I'm happy with both the feel of my maps and also the functionality of them. I can show you here my map for now. So also one thing that I am doing that I think that was a happy coincidence is that I am using Shadow Dark for my games lately. So I'm very conscious about using lights in the map because in Shadow Dark light is pretty important for the gameplay. So in this map here, I don't have any lights put, like any sources of light. But at the same time, I am very conscious of how the light looks and how they work on my maps. And I think that I achieve a good result, both in terms of light and in terms of map making. So some pointers that I been stress testing a lot lately is the thickness of the walls and how they interact with the vision of the players. And this looks super simple, but when you create maps like this, you have to take decisions about how are you going to manage corners like this. For example, here I am just defaulting to doing squares and letting the player feel that this is a map that exists in a screen, for example, or in a paper. So you would see things like this. I am also using overlays. You can see that this is a thing that is over the player. There are configurations in Foundry that you can make these things transparent when the token is underneath, but I am actually very conscious on how to design these things so they don't avoid the player interacting and seeing easily the token. That way I can just like have this element here with an artistic look that I can control, and I think that is pretty, I guess. But I am also doing things like using this is a secret door, by the way. The player wouldn't see this icon. I am saying because I am in the GM here, but I am using secret doors. And I mean, as you can see, this is a pretty obvious secret door because it is not intended to be a secret. It is just a way to gate players. So I would describe this room and stuff like that, and the players would probably be toying with tokens. I'm not even taking into consideration what the players do with those tokens in the first games. Later, I may actually punish them if they move the tokens out of their turn or whatever, but the idea is that they can, if I want to, I can tell them, okay, you're free to explore this room. Yeah, just see this and that. But if they get to this point where they want to advance, it can be noisy and difficult to run in a regular table. So what I want to do is to gate their advance, just because I want to have the players here, and they say, okay, I go upstairs. Yeah, okay. I show you the upstairs situation, and I just start describing the room here, and I open the door manually. This is not an actual diegetic door in the wall. This is just like me gating the exploration of the players. Something similar happens here, right? I have this room here where there's obviously something here. By the way, my walls are broken, as you can see, because I probably didn't. Oh yeah, this is the problem. I am using some invisible walls. I can explain that later, but this door must be like this. The way when I am using the player, yeah. Now the fog of war is explored, so the player knows what I have here. But at the same time, yeah, those are difficulties for this kind of stuff. I have to manage this door here a bit better later, but for now, this is what happens, right? You see the room in here, This could be totally a regular door. I just don't like using regular doors. This is a secret door still. I don't like using regular doors because the players can interact with them and they defeat the purpose of gating their progress in terms of I can open the door for them and tell them what happens when I open that door. I am actually doing some weird stuff with regular doors plus invisible walls, but plus secret doors and stuff like that, because what I want is for the map to be pretty in the screen of the players. Basically, if you are seeing this map, I want to give you a sense of the map in its totality, but also like the idea of this is a piece of artwork. If I make prettier maps than this, I want the players to see them. Not, I mean, I'm not using Roll20 for maps because I want for things to be pretty. And this is part of the experience too for the players, right? This can be more or less immersive, but yeah, this is another example of a gating door, invisible door that I can use to tell the players, okay, you enter a cave system. Okay, that's the cave system. And this is an experiment map. It is not an actual dungeon, but this section here I am using for wall placement experiments. Yeah, I can start with that part actually. So what you're seeing here is the secret door. These yellow things are the regular walls, and these blue things are invisible walls. So what I'm doing here is creating first, like with the walls, I'm creating containers for the tokens, but also for the vision of the tokens. This wall here is a regular wall, so the player wouldn't pass through them. But also this is a wall that is not accessible until the player is around here. Why I'm using this wall here, I am using it because I want this section of the map to be visible fully, because the other option is to use a ragged wall around these parts and generate a kind of a difficult vision situation. If I was playing on a table with this map, I wouldn't be able to make the players see just this corner or a realistic way of showing this, like interacting with walls and whatever. And I am not even interested in that, right? The player is entering cave system. I can tell them that this is dark, crowded, damp, whatever, but I actually want them to be able to move the token without much difficulty. And in order to be easy to use, like basically this is ease of use for the map. So I want them to see the whole cave. My idea here is not to disorient them, and B, I want them to actually be able to place the token in places that it seems logical to be placed. For example, here in this part here, there's a tiny bit of a square, but it wouldn't be logical that the player can move here, right? So yeah, he can't. There's a wall here, and I have designed this cave actually thinking which squares I am going to open for the players and which don't. Specifically, I used a vector drawing program, and I specifically moved these points in the grid so they look like they are accessible. This here might be the exception, right? Because it is kind of tiny for a player, but I still allow it. This here could be difficult to access to, maybe in some situations, but also I need some way for the player to get into here, right? So I am taking those decisions when I draw the map, and then respecting those decisions when I draw the invisible walls. And at the same time, if you're a player moving the token, you don't have to try to move, oh, I cannot move here, I cannot move here. That's that's what happens when you import a random map from the internet, or you draw without thinking about squares in a map, and you just then trace perfectly the map with your walls. You end up like, probably if I do this here, I perfectly trace my corners here perfectly, and then I have a wall here. Yeah, this is not accessible by a token, even though the map is drawn to imply that the token can access that, right? So first, of course, have a grid in your software, then draw the map, or at least put the walls in a way that, the accessible points have a visual logic, right? One last thing that I want to show you is this here. So this is a secret door, and this is a secret door in terms of this door is not visible by the characters, right? Not only for terms of gatekeeping, that's an ugly word, but in terms of managing their exploration, but also in terms of that they have to find this door with the mechanics of the game. And many of the decisions that I take during map making, let me show you. Many of the decisions that I take during the creation of the assets that compose this map are gated towards, taken towards having a cute map, but also a map that rewards player curiosity, rewards player observation, and doesn't have some problems with secret doors, walls that should impede light but don't, walls that shouldn't impede vision but do. These kind of things that you can find with maps that are not specifically created for a specific VTT. This is FoundryVTT, and I am actually taking into account that each grid has an 8 divisions per square, right? 1, 2, and you cannot get closer unless you just don't use the grid. There's a combination of shift maybe, move and then shift. Move and then shift lets me put things wherever, but then I cannot snap to a grid. That is super useful to creating maps. So what I do in my program when I'm designing these maps is to actually create a grid. The grid is 100 by 100. That's the recommended size for grids in FoundryVTT by FoundryVTT. That's a recommendation from the developers. More than 100 generates maps that are too big. That's a good map. I like it. But yeah, more than 100 by 100 square grids are too big, maybe because this map is like 4,000 by 3,000 something. If you add like 25 pixels for the grid, you end up with like 6,000 by 6,000 images. That can be kind of heavy. I still have to test 124 by 124 grids. It might work. But yeah, in this case, I have grids of 100 by 100. And if I divide this grid in into 8, I have 12.5 pixels between each wall. Knowing that, I create that grid in my software of choice. In this case, I'm using, how is it called? Inkscape. And after that, I know that if I respect the grid, then I can import this map and everything will snap perfectly. And I don't need to design such an organic way, super organic shapes that don't fit the map perfectly or whatever, because this is a representation of the space. It is not the actual space itself. I am going to describe things anyway. So I prefer to generate an image that feels cohesive, that feels kind of beautiful and cool to look at. And then, basically be able to snap easily the grids. And the ease of snapping is super cool because you can do the map super easy. But also, one thing that I feel is important is that the end result is consistent. And I think that that's something that a player can appreciate. This map is kind of weird in terms of that it is more like a drawing in less than a map. But when you use those lines and those spaces and stuff like that for regular dungeon walls, then it is super easy to create those invisible walls, invisible doors, separation between rooms, etc. Like natural cave systems and organic shapes like these ones, because you end up kind of rounding up, right? You end up using squares to define round shapes, and I still use a lot of invisible walls to define the areas walkable by the tokens, and different visible walls to define the vision of those tokens. One cool consequence, so this is the invisible door, right? And it wouldn't be visible by the player. It would look exactly like this. One cool consequence of using a different wall for the vision than for the space that the token can walk. So the token cannot walk through this wall, this one here. But at the same time, the token sees this part here. This may give a better sense of space, but also this respects the size of the token artwork, because in some situations that I couldn't do that, if you get too close to a wall, the wall starts to bleed into the artwork. This is not the worst case scenario. You get this invisible wall, the walking of the token is gated, but the token itself, you can see it perfectly. I think that there's a better example here. Yeah, right. Same thing here. Look at this. I know that my grid, and I can show you the grid here. This is useful for creating walls and stuff like that. I tend to pick a color that is opposite in the color wheel to the one in the map, so I can see it perfectly. Yeah. So look at this. This is the grid. Actually, the grid ends here. But I know that this distance of 12.5 pixels is the distance of snapping for the wall placement, right? So if I move the wall 12.5 pixels to here, this is still not a grid that is accessible by the token, but I have some padding around the tokens and around the walls and the artwork, and it is easier in the eye, I think. Also, this 12.5 thickness is basically the thickness of the stroke of the shapes that I'm drawing in my software. So yeah, this is a stroke, and this stroke goes all around the thing because I am drawing shapes in Inkscape. And so it is 12.5 from one side, 12.5 from the other side. The resulting shape has a thickness of 25 pixels. I don't think that this color palette is perfect still for my maps. This is an experiment. I wanted to change color. I am usually working with this palette. This is kind of a spoilery, okay, because this is an actual map of an actual DCC module that I'm adding to Shadow Dark. But look at the palette; it's super cool. The colors are so old school and stuff like that. This is an organic shape that I wanted, that I was talking before, and I think that this color combination works better. So yeah, this is Blender. This is kind of a side tangent, okay, but this is how I manage my stuff here, because I export my images in black and white from the vector software. And then I recolor them and put effects over them. Look at this, right? So my standard right now is to create a grid, gridless map, a map with a grid. An image for the forward that is gridless, the same image but with the grid, and then the overlays. The overlays are the transparencies over the map. With this setup, I can just connect the images here, apply the effects, and this node of effects I created myself, and then I output everything with a single key. When I press F12, in this case, Blender renders these images and just saves it in a folder that I just have to copy and paste to put it into the Foundry module that I created for this map. So these effects do a bunch of things. This, for example, these here are the bands to create this CRT effect or whatever. But the interesting thing here is just that these ramps are the colors of the image. I can just change the colors from here. I don't know. I am going to say that instead of black, I'm going to have like a very dark blue, right? And this is the process. So I can recolor my images after the fact. It is super quick too, because I can just make a change in Inkscape, export the images, and just like come to Blender and literally don't do anything else than press F12, and my images are modified and saved. For this map, I did a bunch of effects, but like the same idea. It is an effect chain that I do in Blender, where I put like textures, like paper texture and printing texture and stuff like that. A bit of bloom. And this is the last point that I wanted to talk about. Why I am using a map with a grid in the image instead of using like the grid of the VTT. Well, because first of all, this is an old school style map and they had grids, so I am using the grid in the image, and I think that it works. But also, if I add effects in my image, like this this printing artifact where the colors are not exactly placed like perfectly in the printing process, then the grid has also that effect. In the case of the school, in the case of the school, it is kind of subtle. Yeah, I may have a better version here for that, but yeah, you can see maybe that the bands go over the grid too. Like the grid is affected by the same effect. Yeah, that's basically the idea of why I'm using the grid baked into the image, and therefore I am exporting a version with grid and a version without it. And at the same time, I can control the thickness of it, the colors. I can change the colors dynamically, and I mean that the grid could be a one color here and one color here, right? I can create zones where there's no grid. For example, for this map, for this map, I have some areas where the items are over the grid, and I think that this is one of the cooler effects that you can create to actually make assets pop, right? They are integrated into the image because they are they have the same effects. It looks like this is printed into a paper, but at the same time, yeah, I think that this is the way to manage these things. I am also using a similar effect change for the tokens. Not very different. Yeah, I think that's all. So see ya. I'll probably clean up this video and create a script for a better version of this, and I could go in depth about the creation of assets, why I use such and such thickness, colors, how to create the palettes more effectively with some tools in the internet, super easy, and also how to use all those programs, because everything here is open source except for Foundry. I am using basically just Blender for the compositing, and compositing meaning like the effects, and Inkscape to draw the map in black and white. Sometimes I use GIMP. This effect of printing is done by GIMP, but this one is done with Blender. So yeah, tomato, you know. So yeah, thanks for watching. If you're a rando that I didn't specifically send the video to, and yeah, tell me if you want more info about these things.